A very good afternoon to everybody. So, where is Narendra? Uh, Nobody is showing online right now. Are you there or you have disconnected? Okay, now two persons are there. Please type your names to mark yourself as present. Okay, Neeta is present. Michael is present. Okay, Sai is here. Yeah, actually, I think because you three are here, but I am saying only three people are only one is online. I don't know what is happening. So, anyways, but you are present. Let's wait for Dinesh and Narinder. Good afternoon, ma'am, if you have joined. Good afternoon, Narinder. So, Dinesh is not here. Huh? Dinesh is missing today. So, should we start? So, starting with today's lecture, today I'll be dealing with the biomechanical principles. So, what are biomechanical principles? So, these are basically some set of principles you will find variable in different books. Somewhere it is mentioned that these are only 9 in number, somewhere it is mentioned these are 7 in number, so the number is variable in different books and different sources. So in this lecture I'll be covering only those principles which are in your syllabus. And most of the things you already know, because these principles have been formed in 1960s on the basis of physics only. The laws, the physics, the biomechanics you have already studied up till now, using those things, those laws, these principles have been formulated. So what was the purpose? The purpose was to ease coaches wanted something easy to apply to sports, because they were not able to apply as such laws. So that's why in 1960s, biomechanics scientists and all this fraternity tried to make some formulate some principles so that the application part becomes easier when you are qualitatively analyzing a movement, especially for the coaches. So that was the idea behind these biomechanical principles. So they are not different things. You have already learned all these things. The idea is they have just formulated certain principles so that application part of biomechanics in sports become easier for the coaches. So that was the idea. Okay. So today I'll be dealing with three biomechanical principles and overall cover it why they have formed, and you will understand because you already know all most of the things. Okay. So before going further, so I will first discuss introduction part. So sport coaches want best of the performance in their athletes and reduction in the injury risk risk of injury. By far this is the main aim of all sports sciences, that they aim to enhance the performance and to reduce the risk of injury. So that thing, the same thing the sport coaches want, but they were not able to directly apply these biomechanical laws in their respective sports. So the biomechanics scholars have long been interested in developing such principles that will facilitate coaches in qualitative application of biomechanics. Please focus on the qualitative. Qualitative means you don't include any calculation part, theoretical part, because coaches are really interested in the analysis. They want results. They don't want to get lost in these um, calculations and you know quantitative. They are not interested in that. If quantity is involved, just they want numbers and analysis. They don't want to go into deep. So that was the idea, that was the main aim to develop these principles. Now third point, biomechanical principles are aimed to improve the application part, application of biomechanics in sports. So main aim of formation of these principles were to improve the application of these biomechanics in sports so that it becomes easier for the coaches to do biomechanics in sports. So these principles help in judgment of the quality of human movement. Quality means how properly the movement is executed according to physical principles or the biomechanics principles. And the purpose is improvement of your performance of the athlete, and secondly, reduction in the injury risk. I hope the introduction part is clear why we are studying this and what is the advantage. Coming to the next slide, you will get to know a little bit about history, who developed it, from where they came. So the concept of these biomechanical principles started in 1960s. In 1968, G. Hartmut, German biomechanic, he developed this idea and actually formulated these things. Okay, so these principles were based on the theoretical and mechanical foundations of movement. Means they are following all same principles which you have already, same laws which you have already learned in the previous classes. Okay, and these are mainly focused on the rotational organization of forces in the performance of physical exercises. So that means simply means that whatever movement you are doing, it should be according to biomechanical principles, and the biomechanical principles are again based on biomechanical laws, laws of physics. So in simple line, I can say that the main aim of biomechanical principles is uh, to create easiness for the coaches to apply biomechanics in their respective sports so that they can train their athletes in a proper biomechanical way so that they can enhance the performance as well as reduce the chances of injury. So this was the whole idea behind biomechanical principles. Now the three principles which I am going to discuss in this class are given in the next slide. So these are, the first one is the principle of initial force. In simple words, it means impulse generation. So you already know what is impulse. Impulse is force into time. So it is an ability of an athlete to rapidly produce force. Rate of force production. If you have good, then you have good impulse generation capability. So this one, the first one dealing with impulse generation. So the first principle is the principle of initial force or the principle of impulse generation. Second one is principle of optimal path of acceleration. So it is again pertain when there is acceleration, it means it is pertaining to speed, and it mainly deals that acceleration should be applied at a proper time, at a proper movement, so that you can get success in the desired sport. Very simple example and very relative example to this principle is sprinting. If you want to win or you want to be a good sprinter, then you should have ability to use this ability of acceleration at right moment, right during the takeoff. So I'll discuss that in the later sections or on the later slides. And the third principle is principle of temporal coordination of individual impulses. So this is, third one is dealing with the coordination of your muscles with joints and with your brain, all coordination, the sequential things which is happening, so that is also very important uh, when you want to execute any motion in a biomechanical correct way. Coordination should be there. So all these three will be discussed today, and these three are in your syllabus. Remaining ones I'll discuss in the next class. Okay, so starting with the, before starting with these principles, I will, there is some a classification of these principles. So what is that? Okay, Dinesh has joined. Oh, no problem. Okay, so classification of principles. So classification is basically, they are divided into two parts. One are general principles and one are private principles. They call it in this way. So general means, by the word you know, general, that is applicable to most of the movements in a group. So the implementation of principles which are important for a certain group of movements. Here group is involved, so that's why it is general principles. The second one is private principles. So these are very sport specific. So because as I have told you, there are multiple principles, around 9 10 is there somewhere. So they have again classified also. So the idea is to ease coaches so that they understand biomechanics and apply biomechanics in the sports. So both of these principles are actually to do with coordination of joints and muscle groups in the implementation of any motor task. So coordination is must in each and every sport so that you can execute it biomechanically correct manner. Okay, so this is the just a classification idea how they are classified. Now I'm coming to the first principle which I'll discuss today is the principle of the initial force or the principle of impulse generation. Impulse, you all know, is equal force equal to impulse is equal to force into time. How much amount of force you can produce in a required time. So ideally the time should be as less as possible and force should be as more as possible, so that will get good impulse. And the athletes who are well trained, elite athletes who are well trained, have ability to produce impulses, high impulses, because they can produce uh, very large amount of force in a very fraction of time. So that means their force is more, time is less, so that means they are producing great amount of impulses, force impulses, or we also call them strength impulses. So you all know, when some movement happen, any movement which is happening, any motion which is happening is just because of force. because force is there. If there is no force, there is no movement. So this is the fundamental principle of biomechanics, you can say. Whenever you see some motion is happening, force is definitely there. Now in humans, this force comes from muscles. So muscle force pulls on a segment, causing it to rotate faster or slower. If the force is more, you can rotate it faster, your limb, your leg, your arm. So this is the movement, and muscle force is behind that. Now focus on the third point. The speed of the distal segment determines how much force it can apply. What is the meaning of this? This simply means that if your hand is rotating very fastly, so that tells us that how much force your arm has undergone, because both are connected. If your arm or from the joint from the shoulder is rotating your arm, very rotation is happening with a great impulse, that means a great amount of force has been applied, so that will result into very fast movements of your hands because both are connected, and you are executing some movement very fastly with your hands. So your hands speed will determine how much force is being applied on your shoulder joint. Similarly, your foot will decide about your leg. So all these three points which I have told you will help you to understand how force is producing, how force rapidly is producing in a given amount of time. So that simply means how impulse is being generated. So these are the three things which should be there. That force should be there, and force is from muscles. And when muscular force is there, you are able to rotate your uh, proximal limbs like your body segments, and that as a result of that your hands or the distal parts will move. Okay, so what principle says by definition? The principle of the initial force states that if the purpose of a movement, any movement, for example in this way, if the purpose of the movement, consider this movement which is on the right side, he's sprinting. Okay, so the principle of the initial force says that if the purpose is to maximize, is the purpose is to maximization of the speed at instant takeoff, the acceleration must be greater than zero at the beginning of acceleration phase. So what it means, you will understand when you focus on the that again on the sprinter photograph or figure. You all know that during sprinting there are two main phases. One is single sport phase, which is on the left side, and the middle is the flight phase when your both legs are in the air. So I've already discussed this figure in the previous class, and same thing is applying here, that if you want to take off very quickly to win in a sprinting race, then you should produce rapid amount of force in zero point 0.2 seconds. That is must. So this has been quantified on the basis of experience, on the basis of data. So it should be as rapid as that. Just in the fraction of time, in the 0.2 second, you should be able to generate rapid amount of force so that you can take off very early and then sprint very fastly and have this ability. And if you fail to attain that amount of force in that small fraction of time, then you will lose the game. So that is the idea. So same thing it is saying that you should apply the acceleration should be that at the beginning of the acceleration must be greater than zero at the beginning of the acceleration phase. Okay, so you should apply that impulse right at the beginning. The acceleration should be applied right at the beginning in the 0.2 seconds. If you are trained enough, only then you can do that. And what kind of training is given to achieve this? Ballistic training, polymetric training. So this is the idea. So by applying this principle, you can very easily know that sprinter is ready for the game or not. If he is able to produce impulse, then he is ready. Otherwise not, he needs training. So this is the idea. So which muscle, so muscular force have to be optimized. So how biomechanically this is creating. So now focus on the last point. As muscle force causes segment motion, so segment motions or segment movement are caused by muscular forces, they have to be optimized. You cannot rely on muscles only to produce this amount of force. If you rely on the muscles only, that muscles will produce that amount of force totally from the muscles, then you will not be biomechanically efficient. So for to optimize this optimization of the force production, you need SSC, that is stretch shortening cycle. So this is how things are related. Now from the first principle, you already know what you got from these previous from the previous lectures. You already know that acceleration should be there, impulse should be there. Now SSC has came. So these all three principles you already know, and all these are now connected to this principle of initial force. So that is the idea. Now I'll discuss again this SSC, because this is if you have ability to utilize your short stretching cycle, then you can produce impulse, rapid impulse, and that will help you to win the game. Because if you have good impulse generation ability, then you have good explosive power. You can produce rapid large amount of forces in a very lesser time, and then you will be very faster, and you can execute your movements very fastly. So that is the idea. Now I'll again discuss this SSC, because it is a great ability which is provided in our body, but you have to utilize it, and you can utilize it only when you train well. So SSC is an ability of athlete to make his movement efficient. Why efficient? Because this SSC allows you to store energy in the form of elastic energy. Okay, and that energy will be utilized to produce force. So this is the concept of SSC. So what exactly it is? SSC is basically rapid cyclical muscle action which involves eccentric contraction. There are three phases, you already know. Eccentric, that is lengthening of the muscle, then followed by transitional period, means amortization phase comes. It is a connecting phase. So eccentric contraction, then this translation period, and then concentric contraction. So during concentric contraction, shortening the muscle, the propulsion part, if you are performing a jump, or the last execution part of the movement is done by concentric contraction. Now this concentric contraction is aided by your stored energy, because during this contraction you are not going to apply full amount of your force of produced by your muscle, because the force which was produced by your muscle during eccentric contraction or during pre-stretch will be stored, and then it will be utilized during this contraction, and that will make you efficient. So this is the idea. So SSC allows you to store energy. Where it is stored? The tendon is the area, because it is an elastic one, highly elastic property. So tendons are able to store. Muscles have some ability, but majorly tendons are there to store your elastic energy during SSC. And then in the later stages of SSC, when concentric contraction is happening, which is basically the last phase where the execution of movement will happen. If you are jumping, so in the last phase, this concentric contraction will help you to propel in the air, to have flight time, good height. So that the force for that contraction will be utilized by your stored energy. So you don't have to make another effort by your muscle to propel yourself. You have to just make that uh, work only once during eccentric contraction. So the SSC increase the force production by utilizing stored elastic energy. And last point, the quickness of the muscle stretching results in good loading of the muscles. So how you understand this? So SSC is basically, if you in the layman language, it is the spring ability of your body. So in the spring, when you load it very harshly with full force, then it will jump very aggressively. जितना ज़्यादा दबाएंगे उतना ऊंचा उछलता है. Same thing is here. If you load your muscle loading, if you stretch your muscle, so in our human bodies, what do you do? If you are trained enough to utilize SSC, what will happen? As you are trying to jump, you will stretch your muscles in advance, make it very stiff before even start of SSC. So what that will do, that will elongate your tendon, and this will allow the storage of energy. during eccentric contraction. At the same time, your muscle will contract in the eccentric way, and your energy will get stored in the tendon. And then last phase will come, which involves concentric contraction, and during that phase, this stored elastic energy will be utilized, and you will propel in the air if you are performing a jump. And many athletes have some query that SSC is only involved in jumping. So that is not the uh, true concept. SSC is involved in all rapid movements you do during running, during change of direction, during jumping. So it is a very universal concept, and you should, if you are able to utilize it in a very good way, then you are a very good athlete biomechanically. So that is all about SSC. Now coming to the second principle. This is principle of optimal path of acceleration. So the human movement which requires maximum final speed. So any movement which you want to execute, which at the end wants high final speed, the path of acceleration has to be optimal. What that means, that you should apply acceleration right at the moment. You should not alter it. It should not be too early. It should not be too late. It should be at the proper time. So again, it is related to previous one. In the first principle, we were dealing with force. Now we are dealing with the acceleration. This is the only difference. The idea is same. Again, SSC will be utilized again to have this ability. But now you will understand this in example. I'll show you in the next slide. Coming to the next slide, just focus on the graphs. Focus on the bar number 2. So these are the 5 cases. And this is an experiment done to understand these principles. So first of all, I'll let you know what is the idea, what is this experiment going on. So these 5 graphs you are seeing is basically 5 jumps by an athlete, same athlete who is trained enough elastically, and he has good ability to use his SSC, stretch shortening cycle. Now the first jump is normal jump where he is using his SSC capability. He is making some movement like counter movement so that he can stretch his muscle in advance and then perform the SSC utilization and get the good height. Okay, so the first jump is normal counter movement jump. Second one is the jump is, and then this jump is almost similar to the first jump, but there is a pause in between. For example, he is doing a dip, counter movement में एक dip होता है. So after dip, he is giving a pause. He is stopping that movement, and then again doing maximum jump. So ये variability is there. Second one, this variability. Third one is jump without arm swing. So in third, the arm swing is restricted. And keep in mind, in all these jumps, arm swing is allowed. Usually during the test, we don't allow because it enhances the height. But in this experiment, arm swing was allowed during counter movement jump. Okay. So then in the first case, they are doing arm swing, doing counter movement jump properly, and utilizing full SSC. In the second jump, they are having some time interval. In the third jump, they are jumping without arm swing, and in the fourth one, they are doing a slow squat, and in the fifth jump, they are doing a deep squat. So all these motions are being performed by a single athlete. Now the blue one, you can see the blue bar shows you the jump height, and the red one is your path of acceleration. At what moment acceleration was applied? Is it lengthened or shortened? Okay. So now focus on the bar number 2, the second jump. So what was the idea of second jump? In second jump, it was similar to the first counter movement jump, but it involved a few seconds of pause. So when you apply that pause, what are you doing? You are basically altering path of acceleration. You are lengthening it. Okay. See, In the first jump it was around 0.46. In the second it lengthened to 0.48. And what happened? You see the result in the blue. So above that you can see the decrease in the height. In the first jump the height is 0.48, and in the second jump where path of acceleration was altered, it is 0.44. So if you alter the path of acceleration, if the acceleration is not applied at the right moment, then you will lose your performance. This is the idea of second principle, because it is not executed at the perfect time, at the perfect moment. So that if so there is some slowing down, and you are not able to utilize your SSC properly, and as a result your jump height decreases. So this is the idea of this experiment. Later three I'll discuss later on. So now focus on the result in the next slide. So the observed decrease in the jump height is due to inefficient use of stretch shortening cycle, which adversely affects the rapidability, the speed of the rising of force. Because if you are not utilizing your SSC properly, you are not producing impulse properly. When you are not producing impulse properly, you are not accelerating at the right moment, and we are not accelerating at the right moment, you are not producing good amount of power, and as a result your final outcome will decrease. Here final outcome was jump height, so it got decreased. So you should always follow these principles. I hope this second one is clear. First one is you should produce rapid impulse at the right time. Second one is you should uh, uh, accelerate your movement at the right moment. If you change any of these two, you will lose performance. And both of these are connected to one basic principle, that is SSC, stretch shortening cycle. Simple. Now the third principle, and this is the last principle of this class today, we are discussing. So this is the principle of temporal coordination of individual impulses. What that means? It simply means coordination of your body segments so that you can execute any movement in a very biomechanical correct way. So the principle states that it is only through the dynamic work of major muscle chains. For example, if you are jumping, you are utilizing your hip muscles, knee muscles, okay, and then ankle muscles. All three joints are involved, okay. So this is chain of muscles there. So that is the chain. So the principle states that it is only through the dynamic work of major muscle chains and the participation of all the joints, जो मैंने आपको अभी बोले, all three, okay, both moving as well as fixed. Now there is additional muscle involved in each movement, that is your abdomen muscles, and these are sometimes also called stability muscles, which stabilize you during any sport movement. So that are also involved. Though it is not moving, it is fixed, but still they are contributing to your movement. So all should perform their impulses in a temporal coordination way. They all should be coordinated well in an athlete. Then your efficient execution of movement is possible. If any of these is not coordinating well, then your movement will become less efficient and you will lose performance. So this is the idea. And generally what I have been seen, and what is the principle? Principally it is seen that the proximal muscles are recruited first and then the distal. So what that means, like your trunk muscle, which is fixed one, that is involved, your proximal muscles of your shoulders, and later on your distal muscles like your from wrist and hands. So this is the idea, that in this way they are coordinated. This coordination improves with training. The more training you do, more trained you are, more amount of coordination will be found in your joints and muscles, in full chain of muscles and joints. For example, during a throw का example लीजिए. For during the proximal muscles are recruited first and then distal ones. तो इसमें आपके shoulder के main muscles आ जाएंगे, joint आ जाएगा, your abdominal muscles आएंगे for the stability part, and I have shown you a photograph of a javelin throw. So whole chain of muscles should be coordinated well. Each body segment impulse should be coordinated well. Then you can execute the motion in a biomechanically correct way, biomechanically efficient way. So this is the idea. So this tells you about the principle of the temporal coordination of individual impulses. All body segment movements, all bodies muscle and muscle chain contractions should be coordinated in a particular sequence. Sequence is proximal first and then distal. This is the sequence. This is the temporal coordination of individual muscles. When you have this in you, then you have good ability of coordination. And then when you do this, you'll have very good flight time in your jumps. And that again signifies that you are uh, biomechanically well trained athlete. Now again that graph will come to make the concept more clear. Now focus on third graph. Now in the third jump, what we have done in the third jump, the jump was without arm swing. So arm swing was restricted in that. So when you restrict something, so here restriction of arm swinging is what it is doing. It is breaking the chain of that muscles. That is not allowed in this particular jump. So what you are restricting coordination of individual impulses in this experiment in jump number 3. So when you restrict that, what will happen? You can see from the graph in number 3 graph, you can see the red portion. You are increasing the path of acceleration, number 1, and second thing, decrease in the jump height again. So that will also affect your performance. So this is the idea, that if you are not coordinating well with individual impulses, that will also hamper your performance. So three things you have learned today in these three principles that you should, and all are related to SSC somehow. The third one is a little bit different because it involves coordination, but main principle that is working to generate these rapid speed abilities is your SSC. If you are able to utilize your SSC stress shortening cycle, then first principle, you can produce rapid impulse. Second principle, you can produce rapid acceleration at right movement. And third, with these kind of trainings, you automatically get coordination in your muscle chains. And you again, third will also apply. So in this way, all these things are related, and very easily you can apply these principles on the athletes during training, and this helps the coach to some extent. So these are old concept which were developed in 1960s, but right now there is a lot of advancements. Softwares are there. They Now we also use softwares. So softwares make things very easier, but the principles are like this. You should know the principles. So that's why this was the idea. Now the last slide, summary of the main purposes. What are the main purposes behind all these principles? The first one is maximization of the final speed. You want to increase your speed, like throwing में आपका speed अच्छा हो, so throwing game, sprinting. Second point is providing maximum power. So if you have these abilities, you will have maximum power, and that will help you in the weightlifting, freestyle wrestling, judo. Maximization of force. If you are good impulse producer, that means you are producing good amount of force in a very short period of time. So that will help you again in weightlifting, wrestling, judo. Minimization of time. If you are good impulse product, if you have good ability to produce impulse, then you will take less time. You can do the same task in a rapid time. For example, there are two players. One has good ability of like this. He's trained enough to use SSC. He can perform that lift of 200 kgs in 1 second. And on the other hand, who is untrained, he's not going to use his abilities like this. So he'll take more time. So minimization of time happens if you have these principles. So optimization of time variations of moment of inertia, free flight rotation. So it is related to your coordination again. If you are producing more amount of force, you can very rapidly and uh, break the inertia and do the task well. Optimization of the postures also happens if you have these abilities in you. Optimal supply of energy and its transformation. That is again SSC, transfer and optimization of your energy. You are storing energy well. If you are using SSC well, you are storing energy well. When you are storing energy well, you can utilize that energy in your propulsions part in the later stages of the your for example, in the jump, in the last stage of concentric contraction, you can do it well. And last point, maximum efficiency of propulsive power in fast flow interactions. Again, this is the same point. When you have all these abilities, you can propel very efficiently. You can do jumping tasks, you can do running tasks very easily, because in running also takeoff is there. So all these principles, if you apply, will help you to become a biomechanically correct athlete, and that will help you to enhance your performance and reduce risk of your injuries. So that is all about principles today. Hope you understood, and now please share your experiences. Very few portions of syllabus have remained, so that's why now I am dealing with lesser topics in a class, so that you can understand well also, and we can have classes, more of classes. So that is the idea. So in today's class I have dealt with these principles. Hope you liked it. Thank you very much. If you have any question, please type here. Welcome all.